Thank you for joining us today as we continue to talk about the importance of building students that are ready to learn. We have three guests with us today, and before we get started, I would love for them to introduce themselves. Amanda, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Amanda Center. I am the content marketing manager here at Hegarty. Prior to my time at Hegarty, I was a second grade teacher for 4 years. I absolutely loved it. I taught in the state of Arizona. Second grade is the best grade ever, not biased at all. I just truly believe that. And at the end of the day, I know that I am a lifelong educator no matter what. So I'm so grateful to be here.
We're grateful to have you. Sean,
Hi, I'm Shawn Toy. I am a K-3 reading intervention teacher. This is my 12th year of teaching. Before this, I taught kindergarten for 4 years and then first grade for 4 years. So I absolutely love what I do, and literacy is definitely my passion.
I love it. And Heather?
Hi, I am a resilient learning expert here. I'm bringing my knowledge of nervous system regulation. I have a company where I teach nervous system regulation to individuals and to groups, and I'm working with Haggerty to bring this into classrooms.
And we're so happy to have you again. So, as I mentioned, at Hegarty, we've been talking quite a bit about the importance of being learning ready. Because while we know the importance of explicit and systematic instruction in literacy and across all content areas, we also know that if children are not ready to learn, it doesn't go very far, right? It doesn't matter how explicit or systematic your instruction is. But with that said, we really wanted to take some time to talk about the flip side. In order for our children to be ready to learn, we as educators also have to be regulated, right? And teaching is a hard profession, from burnout to strong emotions to, certain things that maybe make us feel certain ways. There's definitely an awareness and an ability that we need to have to be able to regulate our own emotions. And so we really wanted to dig into that a little bit more. And before we get started, Heather, I would love for you to just share a little background. So if we have listeners that this is their first webinar that they're joining and they haven't really heard any of the work we've already done, just to build some awareness of what that means when we talk about being learning ready or the ability to self-regulate.
So, our bodies are built with this incredible ability to react to stress. And I mean, you kind of already know this, right? When a stressful thing happens, your body gets activated, and then after a little while, it comes back down. And what that does in your brain is it turns off that kind of clear thinking, the part of your brain that needs to process, and you're reacting really quickly, which is great in an emergency. But
Mhm.
when we're talking about stressful situations, interpersonal or in the classroom, that response can be disruptive and break down relationships. And when we're in a chronic stress state, it can keep us in that heightened state and can lead to burnout. And so, what we're talking about here is nervous system regulation is the body's ability to go up and down, to ebb and flow in and out of those states. Regulation is not just a steady state. But
Right.
what we're talking about here when we talk about being regulated is also sort of deliberate regulation. So
Mhm.
when our bodies are stuck in that heightened state, things we can do to help bring us back down so we can bring that thinking brain back on and really be present and be able to communicate effectively and teach effectively.
Right. And
Mhm.
I think that's so important, right? We know that for students, and we talk quite a bit about that, of students being able to regulate and needing to come back down. But it absolutely happens as educators. And we have to not only be aware of it, but we also have to really s- find some time for ourselves to do that work, right? To be able to learn how to self regulate. Um, so I think, Amanda, I might just start with you because one of the things you mentioned, Heather, was the burnout, right? If we're not able to recognize this feeling or be able to regulate, and we're kind of living in this heightened sense um, of dysregulation, you really do burn out. So, Amanda, you mentioned that you taught for 4 years. You taught second grade, and then I think did you teach one more year after that, and then or you got to year four?
So I completed year 4 was where I landed
Okay.
for my time. Mhm.
will you share with our listeners a little bit about we're so happy to have you at Heggerty, but about what changed that journey for you?
Yeah, for sure. I was very much the typical, like, doing school with my younger brother, like, teaching is what I am going to do until the end of time. And I think so often, and this is me talking with my friends during my time in the classroom, my friends who are still in the classroom, is educators are not only the most qualified individuals in the world, but also some of the most caring individuals in the world.
Mhm.
And so I think with leading with your heart and the way that educators do, it's so easy for us to forget about ourselves in the mix of all of that. And I was 100% subject to that. I remember looking at that 5 year statistic regarding teacher burnout, and I was like, that's never going to be me. How could that be me? Like, I'm meant to be a teacher, and I know in my heart of hearts that that is still true. But I was just someone who couldn't find that balance. Honestly, I stayed past my contract hours, went early to do the
Mhm.
classroom, like, decor and, those resets to just really feel like I was showing up for my students in the way that I wanted to, but in that, I was no longer showing up for myself, I wasn't showing up for my family, and unfortunately, it really did have me kind of at a fork in the road of, like, I need to take a step back for myself because at the end of the day, when you really reach that point, you also have to ask, are you sh by not showing up for yourself, are you actually showing up for your students?
Mm,
Right? And
Right.
mhm.
that and it's hard, and it's so hard. So that's what ultimately landed me at that year 4 mark was it was my
Yeah.
time to step away.
And Sean, I think I can then lead into you because I recognize so much of what Amanda was saying, and I'm like, I don't know how many years I taught for, maybe 13, maybe 14, I can't remember. But I see myself, and Amanda and I have had these conversations before about that burnout. Um, and then I know that you've been teaching for several years, that you were able to move beyond that as well, and that gets a little bit tricky, and I'm assuming part of that was being able to kind of recognize maybe some boundary setting or ability to regulate and recognizing some of these emotions and really spending identifying ways that you can take care of yourself and you can
Mhm.
ensure that as an educator you are taking care of yourself. So, in turn, as Amanda said, you can take care of your students. I would love for you to share maybe some things that you have done to ensure that you're setting those boundaries or able to
Yeah,
regulate.
absolutely. So it's funny, Amanda, that you said that you used to stay late and do all those things because that was exactly how I was like my first few years of teaching. So my husband and I are actually both teachers and we were always in the same building together. And we had a new baby at home. And so we were staying like hours after
Mm,
school had ended
yeah.
those first couple years. And I think we both got to the point that we were like, okay, we have to set a boundary of like, this is the work day. And, you always take things home as a teacher. I feel like
Right.
mentally, emotionally, you do take things home with you.
Mhm.
But I think just recognizing like I can't be here until 7 o'clock every night.
Mhm.
And also getting over like the need to have perfection, I think too, is
Mm,
when you talked about the decorations, like I'm the same way. I love a decorated classroom, but I think sometimes like those Pinterest classrooms that you see,
Yeah.
like they're beautiful, but then you kind of feel like you have to like live up to that. And I feel like that was another thing, like always seeking that perfect classroom or the perfect environment. And just realizing like it doesn't always have to be perfect. I think if you're able to show up for your students um, in the best way possible, I think that that is what makes the big difference or the biggest difference. Um, I definitely think finding things outside of the school day that bring you joy are so important.
mm,
So I have 3 kids, so obviously, like, my family is the most important thing, but also finding time for yourself. So I
Mhm.
like to work out. I think that's, like, my way to, de-stress after a long day at work, or maybe you have a hobby or something, but just something that is just for you, that you can kind of do just for yourself to, like whether that's de-stress or, you know, talking to other people about things, I think is really important.
I love that. Heather, I'm going to direct this question towards you because I do think this is really an important different differentiator, right? There's that burnout that that occurs where it's just like, I cannot do this anymore. And then there is that just the stress of being a teacher, as Sean said, right? We bring things home, right? We bring the work home, we bring the worry home, we bring, we care, as Amanda said, educators care greatly. So it's yes, it's the instruction, but it's caring about the children that are in front of you as well, and it's hard not to bring that home. So, how can teachers maybe recognize the difference of, no, this is burnout. This is something that I need to address versus yes, this is part of the job. And of course, we're still going to, take care of ourselves and self-regulate, but how can we differentiate between those two? Because I think that in this profession specifically, that is sometimes a hard line to kind of draw and tell the difference between.
Absolutely. Because, it happens, it's a scale, right? So,
Mm,
but it's important to recognize that stress is actually good, right? Stress is our ability to go in and out. We need stress, right? We need to have grit. We need to have resistance in
yeah.
our lives. Or we go in and out of stress. There's good stress. But stress is temporary. Stress
Yes.
activates our system. It can be hard and it might not be a short temporary, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We know we're going to move through this passage. It's going to be difficult tonight. Burnout is when that stress doesn't ever get to that light at the end of the tunnel. And we're just plowing on and we're not stopping to give ourselves that break. And not to pass judgment in any way,
Right.
but when it builds and we're in that cycle, that's where we start to lead to cynicism. When we lose our interest in what we're doing, you can even become
Mhm.
resentful of the people you're trying to help because in your mind, you're kind of associating them with your source of stress.
Yeah.
So it can be, counter to your own values. So it's really important to pay attention to, okay, is this short-term stress? Is this something I'm moving through? Or am I kind of locked in a constant state of stress? And use that as a time to kind of reevaluate and go, well, is there something that I can do? Is there something I can take off my plate? Is there someone I can talk to kind of right the ship on that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I love the way that you talked about it being a continuum and that, yeah, stress it is a good thing, right? It means we care about something, but we don't wanna we don't wanna live in that constant state. So,
Right.
as we think about that, what we really did wanna talk about was teachers, not only well, educators as a whole, finding time to take care of themselves truly, right, on the regular, not like, "Oh, it's a day, it's the one day a year that I'm going to take off and actually end up going and running errands or doing all of those other things." So taking care of ourselves and finding those boundaries, but also twofold, having this ability to identify when we're feeling heightened, when we're feeling a certain way, and being able to regulate. So maybe let's start with the regulation, right? Um, I've shared many times, I started as a sixth grade reading and language arts teacher on the south side of Chicago, and my students they came to me with a lot of dysregulation and a lot of needs. And there were times that I felt like I intuitively knew how to support them, but there were times where I felt heightened, right, by what was happening in the classroom, right? I have a student throwing a chair across the classroom, like that is elevating me. Or
Mm.
perhaps, we've talked in previous webinars and podcasts about maybe certain things personally that kind of get to you, and then you see that so being able to recognize that. So unfortunately in education, we don't learn these strategies of like, how do I number one name it, but then number two, how do I support myself in regulating the emotions that I'm feeling before I then can support my my students. So I would love across the board, Amanda, Sean, Heather, to share some ideas that maybe you've used in the past, or Heather, just from your experience, what you think is helpful.
I know for me
Um,
sorry, Sean,
no,
go
you're
ahead.
good. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I know
Yep.
for me, one of the things that really did help was normalizing having a bad day with your students. I think
Mm,
that there is so much power in the kiddos in your class seeing that an adult also has a bad day or also feels sad or also feels excited.
Yeah.
And not all feelings are going to be positive. It's so normal to
Mm.
have a bad day. So there were a couple days across my 4 years where I went into the class and I was during our morning circle, and we're going around and we're talking about how we're entering for the school day, that I was honest and I was like, "You know what? I didn't sleep very well last night. So I'm not really feeling like I'm in the best like headspace for teaching today. So I hope that you all can have grace with me as we kind of
Mm.
move through the day together." Um because that not only showed them, "Oh, wow, she's having these feelings," but it also normalized it for myself, right? Because as the
Mhm.
adult in the room, you wanna put this cape on and say, "I am nothing can bring me down. I'm here for the kids," which is all true, but a part of that humanness is accepting that you can show up for your students and also be having a bad day. Like,
Mm.
2 things can be true at once.
Mhm.
And so that was one of not the highlights of being in the classroom, but one of those strategies that I really feel like had an impact for myself and the students in my class.
I think that's great because children learn self-regulation through co-regulation,
Mhm.
and children learn through modeling. So, for us to show up and say we're having a hard day, ask for grace, show them how we're gonna help take care of ourselves through the process, that's beautiful. That's modeling exactly what we wanna
Mhm.
show, you know? I mean, it's not about protecting them from that, obviously, from your rage or from those outsized
Right.
emotions, but letting them know that you also struggle, that you're human, because it gives them permission, right? And we all need that to feel less alone that we're
Mhm.
struggling, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think it validates their feelings too when we show them like we have the same feelings. Like, even as an adult, I still feel sad or I feel worried, like all of those things. Something that we used to do, and it was kind of a school wide or district wide initiative, but I really loved it. It was called Calm Classroom. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before.
Mhm.
Um, but they're like very short, almost sort of like a meditation kind of, but it would really like relax their entire like nervous system. And we would always do it after recess, which I feel like they would
Yeah,
come in and they would be like, squirrels. So we would just do it all together as a class. And I think you can find it online, but it was just a very short, like 1 to 2 minute, just like relaxing. Like it just really grounded everyone. And I would do it with them. And I feel like it really did. Like, it just brings you, like, a lot of, calmness and peace, so, yeah.
I
yeah,
love that. I also
that's
love
great.
though that when I'm listening to this and I'm like, "So what do you do to regulate?" We all as educators come back to the children of like, "Well, I helped them co-regulate," or "I maybe wasn't having a great day, but I was modeling that for them," or "Calm Classroom is great for them, and I also used it." And so I think what I love is this recognition that it's not one or the other, right? Like,
Right,
just hearing that both of you talk through that of maybe I was having a bad day, but I was also supporting my students and identifying that and helping them understand that this is normal. Or I'm showing my students how to regulate, and I'm showing them that this helps me as well.
yeah,
And I think that just makes such a difference for our children too, right? To
yeah,
see that, wait, this is a process. This is normal. Like, feelings, emotions are normal, and there are things that we can do to regulate our bodies
yeah.
and, kind of bring us back down.
And I think the Heggerty approach that we're bringing is this is infused throughout the day. This
Yes.
isn't
Mhm.
something that you're learning on a weekend. This is those moments, those transition
Mhm.
moments, because they're hard for the educator as well. How
Absolutely,
can we
yep.
all, you know, shake things out and then bring ourselves down into a calm state, you know? And when you're frazzled, being able to stop, like you said, kind of do some somatic work, be in your body, remind yourself, get your feet back in balance, whatever it's going to take to sort of remind yourself that you're here and you're now. And it can make such a dramatic difference when it's
Mm,
infused throughout the day.
Mhm.
yes. And I think this is such an important conversation because we have to be well as educators,
Mhm.
right? We have to take care of ourselves. But again, it's also supporting our children,
Mhm.
right? Because if we're dysregulated, that then feeds into the classroom. They're feeling that dysregulation, that's impacting their learning. So I think one of the next things I would love for you to share is if you can think of a time that your own dysregulation maybe impacted a moment in the classroom, or you saw that impact either, the environment in the classroom as a whole or perhaps an interaction with a child, and what that impact was.
I can go first. Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
please.
Um,
Yeah.
I think for me, it's really just like not usually like one big thing, but it's like a lot of like little things that like tend to build up and like I just start to feel like overwhelmed.
Mm,
Like I feel like I have this whole list of things I have to get done and I'm like, okay, what should I do first? What should I do next? And sometimes just like one more little thing is like, when you start to feel overwhelmed and stressed. Um so I think just sometimes I just start to feel very rushed. I can
Mm,
feel that I'm feeling like, okay, like I just set in like a little bit of a panic mode, like trying to, do all the things. It feels urgent, or maybe you don't feel as patient as you always do. I feel like that's how I feel when I get to that point. It's
mhm.
just maybe not as much patience sometimes. Um,
I
just
feel like
feeling
that's
overwhelmed.
Right. So I don't know an educator that can't like recognize that, or
Right.
probably I haven't taught in several years and I can feel that.
Mhm.
And I think it's important for us to name that because that is the profession, right? There's so much on an educator's plate. There's so much on a teacher's plate. And it is so easy to get caught up in that I have to do this, this, and this, and this. And then that impacts the relationships. It impacts the way that you're feeling. Your students can feel that too. And I think it goes back to why this is such an important conversation because yes, there are things we have to get done, but that most important thing is our relationship with the students, right?
mm,
And if we're taking the time to recognize that, that lightens the load for us a little bit and takes some of
mm.
that pressure off while we're actually doing something really impactful and ensuring that, our children are feeling really the relationship rather than the stress.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would
because that
agree
stress
with
is contagious, right?
it is, yeah, and that's I mean, Sean, to Marjorie's point, like, I can think of, like, doing an oral reading fluency test while a small group is playing in the corner and they're getting a little more rowdy, and then the phone rings, and then someone comes in to pull out a kid, like, I know that anyone that is listening who has been in the classroom can literally feel like, I feel it in my chest, and Sean, everything that you said, you feel the patience just essentially, like, slowly dwindling, right? Where it's like, "Oh my goodness, like, I have so many things to be thinking about right now that your brain can't help but enter that, like, fight or flight of, like,
Mhm.
what is my next move, right? It's
Yeah.
really yeah, you explaining it again, Marjorie, you said you felt it, I felt it as well, where I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, there goes an email saying that I didn't submit my attendance today while I'm trying to
Yep.
test 30
Oh, I
kids."
was so bad at that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like announcements, fire drill,
Oh
emails,
my
Oh
like
goodness,
gosh.
all
yes.
the things. Yeah,
Mhm,
for
Yeah.
sure.
mhm, mhm.
It floods the brain. I mean, it can be like all the stimulus is coming in at the same time. It can be
Mhm,
really hard to parse out like where I need to put my attention. And that's where that regulation comes in terms of, okay, can I just pause for a second? So it gives your thinking brain back on and you can go, okay, this is the highest priority. I can ignore that. I can do, and
yeah.
it helps you be able to put things in order. Um, and when we're stressed, like we talk about stress contagion, but I just got mad at my kids this morning, and I was, like, realizing that, like, I was frustrated or having my own shame, and I was
Mhm.
basically just, like, putting it on them, and I had to apologize and correct, but I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's what it is." Like, I take my stress, and I'm like, "Here you go. This is for you
Mhm.
now."
Mhm.
But that's why, yeah, pausing, we can be able to order things in a for ourselves a little
I
better.
think that it just a couple of things that you just said that are really, really important. And, we maybe have some listeners that are listening to this and being like, oh, yes, of course, it's important we take care of ourselves. But we say that as educators and we don't do it very well, right? So I think it's important to continue to name it and to identify that this is important and it actually makes you better at your job and
Mm,
it makes those relationships better. but also to understand that this isn't a webinar where we're talking about learning regulation and it's going to be perfect. And
Mhm.
then you're just going to go and you're never going to be stressed and you're never going to feel like you're on that continuum of like leaning towards the burnout because that's definitely, I'm sure that continuum moves back and forth still for you, Sean, but it's not a perfect, now I have these strategies and all of the sudden I'm never feeling it. It's,
Right.
no, I'm feeling it and I can recognize it and do something about it, or shoot, I maybe didn't recognize it right away, but now I also know how to repair perhaps a
Yeah,
relationship, um, or the next steps to take when I have recognized that my dysregulation has had an impact.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that repair work makes all the difference.
Mhm.
I
Um,
do it often with my daughter.
all the
When you said
time,
you got
all
mad
the
at your children
time.
this morning, I'm like, "Oh."
I
And
know, I
again,
was,
like,
like, preparing for this and then snapping at the kids. I was like,
yeah.
"Well,
Exactly, and
still
I
human."
think that's important, right? Like,
Yeah,
that is part of the process,
yeah,
and classrooms can be really stressful, and there can be many, many things going on, and there can be that moment where you lose the patience or you're feeling frustrated, and Amanda, I love the way you had those honest conversations with your
no,
students, and, oh my goodness, how powerful is that to say, "Look, like, I'm still doing this work, and, like, you can do it too,"
Mhm.
right? Heather, are there any specific, small, realistic, because we know how busy, a day is in a classroom, ways or strategies that you can share with teachers that they can use during the day, in the middle of the day? Because as you mentioned, we're really trying to talk about this because we know how important it is and that it's not the thing that you do for 5 minutes over here or at the end of the day, but it's the 5 minutes over here at the end of the day, and it's woven in the moments that are needed. So I would love, if you could share just maybe some strategies teachers could use if they're feeling a certain way.
absolutely. I mean, the number 1 is preventative, right? Creating a regulated environment for ourselves, but obviously, like you said, that's not always happening. Um, so a couple things, a couple different things that you can use when you have maybe a couple minutes, and and then I want to talk about when you have almost no time.
Okay,
Um,
great.
for when you have a couple minutes, one of them I call drop and drag, and that's just drop your shoulders and drag out your exhale. And so it's just dropping, breathe in, and then do a slow exhale. And you can do that a couple times. It doesn't take long, but it can just give you a little bit of a pause. And another one, this is very common, called 5 4 3 2 1. And this is really about your senses and what you're taking in and getting you back into your body
Mm.
and getting you out of kind of that frazzled state of mind. And that's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear. I can never remember the order of this. 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can taste. No, and 1 thing you can taste. But the senses, and it doesn't really matter if you get that perfect, which I never do. But
Mhm.
the idea is you're paying attention to what's coming in and you're noticing things and you're getting kind of out of your head and into your body.
Mhm.
And I find those to be really effective. And again, I didn't even remember the details, but it's about,
Right.
right, like just taking a second and going, okay, I can see these things. I can feel this. And
Yes.
then the what I call little jibes, which is a sailing technique to just quickly course correct, um, is shifting your weight. So sometimes when we're really activated, we're like in a stance where we're sort of moving forward, and it's getting just back on 2 feet and feeling that
Oh.
balance. Um, slowing your breathing, just, just bringing it, not even deep breaths, just slow
Mhm.
it down, and then lowering your voice.
Mhm.
Because when you lower your own voice, you're bringing your own nervous system down pretty quickly, and you're bringing the temperature down in the situation. And sometimes we wanna yell and we wanna get,
Yeah.
you know, louder, and actually lowering the voice can actually soften things.
Such simple strategies too, right? So
Mhm.
again, things that we can do at any point throughout the day,
Just yeah,
and we can model for our students as well.
yeah.
Mhm.
And getting on their level, I would say, is
Yeah.
also really, really important when we talk about active listening things. Just when there's a situation, just getting down on their level makes a really big difference too.
Mhm.
I love that. Sean, you mentioned that one of the things that you kind of when you started to create some boundaries for yourself and recognize like you cannot stay till 7 p.m. every night, and you started to identify the things that you are going to do to help yourself regulate. Are there any things like you mentioned calm classroom, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit more, or perhaps some other things that you do to regulate throughout the day or to model for your students?
Yeah, I think what Heather said, I've actually done the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, not at school, but like on a car trip. Like when we go to Disney, we usually drive and it's like 16 hours from our house. And
You're
I feel
using
like
a
there's
lot of
definite
strategies, aren't
yeah.
you?
I'm like, there's definitely times where I'm like, I need a strategy, and that definitely works. So that's definitely something I would try at school. But I have done also like, I don't know if you've heard of like triangle breathing or like
Mhm.
square breathing where you like hold it in for, a few counts and then you breathe out. And I think what Heather said, that deep breathing or just really like slowing your breath, I think has helped me a lot. Um, Sometimes if I get overwhelmed and I have a second, I make a physical list of things that I need to get done. I'm a list maker anyway, but it really helps me to just get it down, get it out of my brain, and then I can think like, okay, what do I need to take care of right now? What can wait a little bit? So that way it's not all just, up
Mhm,
here, but I have it down somewhere. Um, and just really, I think your classroom environment plays a huge part in that too.
Mhm.
Just setting the tone for kids, with your classroom management or the way that your day runs and the structure, I think is super important so that kids kind of know what they can expect throughout the day. Like if they know a schedule, this is what we do first, this is what comes next. I do think that really helps kids regulate too when they can kind of expect what their day is going to look like.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and that's with small group too. I mean, I don't have a classroom anymore, but my small groups are pretty much structured exactly the same way every day. So they kind of know, like, what's going to happen when they come. So I think that's a big, big part of it.
I love that. Anything that you wanted to add, Amanda?
What most of the things that I would do as a teacher now is things that I learned after leaving the classroom,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I think a lot of the conversations that we've been having about learner readiness has just reignited the
Mhm.
fire of, like, I wanna know more. I think recognizing of, like, the practice what you preach. We're talking I had all these lessons and allocated all of this time to my students about teaching them about their brains and teaching them about breathing strategies that they could utilize and using their 5 senses, and go to the calm corner and take a breather as if these are only skills that could be applied to the children in the classroom, not taking a step back and saying, like, "Weird, Amanda, you also have a brain that could really benefit from a lot of the
Right.
things that you're teaching your students." And so I think normalizing that idea that, yes, you can be the teacher of this, but you can also be the student as well. And I think the biggest thing, Sean, you talking about having a life and hobbies and things that are just for you outside of the classroom, I don't think anything could be more true. I at the time during the classroom, I had, built my social media around being a teacher to the point where I was thinking about teaching at school, at home. I
mm,
wasn't entertaining any hobbies outside of that either. And so it really was my teacher brain was on all the
mm,
time. Amanda's
Yeah.
brain didn't have a second to step in and say, "Hey, like, what are we doing?" And so
Right.
I wish that teacher Amanda had the opportunity to really take a step back and say, "What is for me?" Like, is it the gym? Is it daily walks? Is it coloring?
Mm.
Is it what is gonna fill my cup? And that's something that we've talked about too. What's gonna fill my cup so that I can then pour into others? Because I just
Right.
spent my days pouring into others, leaving myself with nothing in my cup, which is unfortunate.
And it's just that is such an important thing to name, right?
Mhm.
We do. And I know we say it a lot, but we that's what this is about, is that it is required as an educator, as a teacher, to do this work and to give yourself those boundaries and to give yourself the support and the ability to learn the strategies so you can not be better just for your students, but obviously be better for you as well. And I think that's one of the questions I was going to ask Amanda is like, what do you wish you would have known about boundaries or wellness when when you were in the classroom? And I'm assuming that's kind of
It is, yeah, it's just knowing that you have to have 'em. You d it's a non-negotiable, truly, like, if you truly wanna do that work, like, again, most educators that are in the classroom, I've talked to many people who have stories just like mine that were doing the fake school, is like, "I'm gonna be a teacher for my whole life," is those boundaries again, and the boundaries can be flexible, that's what's really nice. Maybe you are someone who loves to get there early, but leaves right at the end of your contract
right,
hours, right? Like, maybe you're an
right.
early bird, but maybe you are a night owl where you get there right at the start of your contract hours, but you give yourself some wiggle room at the end of the day. Um, but identifying those boundaries early on are so necessary so that you can sustain, so that you can stay
Mhm.
in the classroom and you can keep showing up for your students in the way that you really want to. And, Sean, you mentioned a to-do list. I think with that boundary is realizing that the list is never ending, truly.
Mm,
Yep.
And
yep,
so
that's
you,
true.
but you writing that list down and identifying the things that I can get these things done right now and they should be at the top of my priority list is like the best frame of thinking, because if you are just letting all those thoughts run, that can be paralyzing, truly, as an
Mhm.
educator. And so, really, and that's another thing that people always say, the list is never going to end, but truly, it won't. You could get to the very end of
Yep.
it, and guess what? The next day, you get into school, and you have
Right.
10 new things on there. And so, that's the other thing, is that the work will always be there, right? But
Mhm.
if you want to do the work, you have to recognize that it does come to a point where you have to take a step back.
You have to. And you
Mhm.
like you said, it's not I wanna be clear too that we're not saying, "Oh, you check in, you check out, and,
Right.
that's what you do." Absolutely not, right? We are all about ensuring that children have access to educators that are, deeply committed to the work, but there is, again, part of that be being able to be deeply committed and to sustain the work and do the work, you have to give yourself that opportunity to take care of yourself as well. So the reality is teaching has always been challenging, but I feel
Mhm.
like it just gets harder and harder and harder, and, I mean, there's no way to pretend that that's not the reality of a classroom. So
Right.
I still have so many friends that teach, and I get calls so often of like, I love it, but I just cannot do it anymore, right? Like, and that's what breaks my heart is that these are teachers who care so deeply, and I think it's the ones that care so deeply that are the ones that are getting burnt out, right? Because they just keep going and going, and it's that ability to create those boundaries, but, there's more than that. So I guess my question was, Sean, do you have any advice for these educators that truly love what they do, but it's becoming so hard and it's becoming so much? Um, how can they stay in this profession, um, and make it feel like this is something that's sustainable if right now it's maybe not feeling that way?
I think and something that I wanted to say earlier too was just leaning on other people, I think is
Yes.
so important. Like, sometimes I feel like when you're inside of those 4 walls of your classroom, like, you almost feel, like, isolated a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think it's just important to find your people, like, whoever
Yeah.
they are, whether they're colleagues at school, whether they're friends, whether they're family. I think having people to lean on is huge. Like, it truly made the biggest difference for me, especially, like, people that understand your profession. They understand the day to day. They know what you're going through. They sympathize. I mean, truly, I think if I didn't have people, I don't know, like, how I would do it. Truly have some of the best coworkers that I work with. So I think that is huge, like, finding your people at school and asking for help. Like, if you are overwhelmed, ask for help. And I think that is hard sometimes, like, to ask for help because I mean, it makes you feel a certain way sometimes,
Mhm.
if you reach out. But I think if you are feeling to that point, like, it's okay to ask for help from somebody, whether that's, the teacher next door or your administrator. I just think sometimes when we try to do it all and we try to do it all by ourselves, I think that's when we get to that breaking point is like
Mhm.
you feel like you have to take on everything.
Yeah.
So I think my biggest piece of advice would be to lean on other people. Like, don't be afraid to do that.
I love that.
Yeah, we talk about relationship-centered teaching and that the relationship with the students, it's relationship-centered all around you, you
Yes.
know? It's because loneliness is so destructive to the body, and going it alone, it just makes life so much harder, and so when we talk about relationship-centered teaching, that means, our relationships as well, and having those to people to lean on and fostering those relationships.
And I love how you said, Sean, find your people. It doesn't have it, maybe it is your coworkers, maybe it is, your grade level teachers, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's some educators at a different school or,
Right.
some friends that you had from the last district you worked in or your family, whatever it may be. Because I know it's wonderful when you have amazing coworkers, but the reality is that doesn't always happen.
Right, right.
So but you can find your people, and I love that you said that, no matter who it is, but you shouldn't feel like you're doing this alone. Um, and if we do have any administrators working or listening, one book I'll recommend that I read as an educator and when I was moving into the administrative role was Shifting the Monkey. And one of the things that I tried to ensure was that I was paying attention to the teachers that wanted to do it all.
Mhm.
And the teachers because I think that's what happens too in the education field is we have the teachers that are passionate and ready to go and they want to do everything and so they're raising their hand for the first they're the first hand that is raised and making sure that as administrators we're paying attention to that too of maybe I do have somebody coming to ask for help but maybe I'm also building an awareness of hey maybe I need to go check in on that educator or that teacher and see if they maybe need some help so any administrators listening, I read a lot of books when I became a building administrator, but that's one I talk about all the time. So I was like, I'll get that little plug in there. It was a really good one and really leans into ensuring that teachers are prioritizing their time and their well-being. Um, I think we can continue this conversation for a really long time, but as we start to think about the time of year that it is and how we're kind of wrapping up the end of the year and moving into the summer, um, I would love for us to just maybe talk about some things that we can do to reset. Teachers obviously take the time in the summer to reset, but I also know I know what I did, and I'm sure Sean and Amanda, you did it too, of, "Okay, here's my list for summer. Here
Right.
are all the things I'm going to do this summer, and I'm getting this done and this done and this done, and I'm gonna go to this professional learning and this PD." So maybe just kind of thinking about what can a reset look like for an educator as
As
we
we
think
think
about
about
the
the
summer?
summer. Yeah, I think small goals can really make an impact. So and this is me giving advice to former classroom teacher, right? Where I wish that I had set a goal of like you can access your computer 1 day a week. Like let's just start
Yes,
there,
I
Right.
right?
love
Because
that.
if I was to sit here and say keep that laptop closed, like don't open it up once, like every teacher's
Not
going to roll their eyes
realistic.
at me.
Yep,
I know that to be a fact, you
yep.
know? And so I wish that I saw more power in small goals of like, let's start with
Mhm,
twice a week. The other days of the week, you cannot touch it. Or let's allocate like rides to the gym is when you can listen to webinars and podcasts that are going to be counted as professional development, right? Or let's allocate you have to venture to a new place at least once a week. So really scheduling in time to work and time not to work as
mhm.
folks who again, Marjorie, have this list that they're ready to tackle over the summer months. But prioritizing that time is so essential because For a lot of educators right now while we're filming it is a light at the end of the tunnel is summer break. So it's like, okay, now use the summer break so that when we come back in
Mhm.
July, August, September, we actually feel refreshed and we feel refueled and that cup is refilled. So that's kind of where my mind goes to.
I love that.
Yeah, I think stepping away, like you said, not checking your email every which I am terrible. I will just admit that, like, I'm terrible. Also going back to school this summer, so my summer will be filled with more schoolwork, but it was by choice, and I'm really excited about it. So, but I think just spending more time with my family, being outside more, spending time with my kids because 'cause they're at school all day, so I don't see them,
Yeah.
throughout the week that often either. I mean, I do before and after, but not as much as I can over the summer. Um, I think what has been helpful for me has been doing just a few things before summer break that will set me up for the beginning of the year. Like things that I know I'm going to need, like a welcome letter or just like little things that I can do right now that I'm like, okay, that
Mm,
stuff is done. So when I go back in the fall, I don't feel like I have to do a whole bunch of things like all at once.
right.
Um, and not spending my whole summer planning for a new school year. I feel like I'm so guilty of this too, but when you scroll, social media, you see all
Mhm.
all these people going back into the classroom, like which is great. Like go back whenever is good for you. I think for me though, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have my summer and then I'm gonna go back when it's
And I
time. So
yes, and I think
yeah,
what you said, Sean, was perfect, is if that's what you want to do and you have the time, and it's filling your cup and you have the
right,
time to do it. So this is not don't do it or do it, it's
right,
recognizing the emotions that are attached to it, and also what your time is and what your availability is, and recognizing like, "Hey, you know what? We might have some teachers that that's actually what fills their bucket and makes them feel good, and they're not putting something on the back burner and not getting something done because they have the ability to do it. It's just that recognition of recognizing your emotions and your feelings and how, and again, your reality of what time you have, to make a decision of if you want to go in. Also, though, like I think as educators, the scrolling is so hard, right? Like, looking at the classrooms, looking at the
yeah,
this, and then what we tell our children is, like, "You shouldn't look social media, then you're comparing," and
yeah,
then we do it as educators
100%.
ourselves. So that's one thing that you should not do. Let
Yeah,
that go, right?
yes.
Um,
Heather, do you have anything that you
yeah,
can
I
think? Yeah.
so I've been working on the journal that we have, on Haggerty that we've been and, I've been thinking about the summer as a threshold, and I really like that word for a lot of things, but a
Mhm.
threshold is, the space between spaces. And it's an opportunity and you can define it how you want. If you wanna go back early, you wanna get going, but just at least taking a period of time of reflection of saying, "What worked for me? What wasn't working? How do I
Mm,
wanna shift things?" Does it mean I wanna put more energy in? Sometimes, like the high achievers, right, can burn out faster.
mhm.
Okay, how am I gonna build in these breaks for myself? How
Yeah.
am I gonna, set boundaries for myself? But I think a threshold is an opportunity to go, I'm not in that anymore, and I'm not there yet. How do I wanna move myself into where I wanna be in that in the next year, you know?
I love that. And I think that's something pretty special about the teaching profession is that we do have that opportunity for the reset of, this year's wrapping up and then we're starting a new year. And not all professions have that opportunity. So taking the time to be reflective for yourself as well, not just reflective of, oh, this year this didn't work in my classroom, or I want to try this new thing, but how was I this year? You know,
Exactly.
how is my well-being? Yeah, and what do I need to do, um, so I can go into next year making sure that I'm a priority? And so that's one thing I think teachers can kind of go into next year holding on to, right? If we're gonna think about wrapping up this year and, like, what's something we can bring into the next year, I think that's something that we can. Sean or Amanda, is there anything else that you would say, or I think we can kind of wrap up of, like, as you go into next year, is there anything that we would wanna have teachers hold on to?
I think just don't dwell on all the things that went wrong because I feel
Love
like that
that.
is
Yeah, I
so
love
easy
that.
to do. It's like to spiral and like, oh my gosh, like all of these things didn't go right and focus more on like what did go
Yes,
right? What is something new that you did this year that you're like, oh, I want to do that again?
Mm,
I have actually started like a gratitude journal. And I think that has really helped me kind of get down all those positive things
I
throughout the
love that.
day instead
Mhm.
of only focusing on, like, what went wrong, really focusing on what went right, and it's even just, like, something small. So I think that is what I would say. Focus on what went well this year and not only on what you wish you would have done differently.
Wow, Sean, we are
excellent.
on the same wavelength because I was gonna say the little wins, like, really let those little wins just be wins, like, let them guide you forward, because even as someone who has left the classroom, the first thing I do think of is all of the wins. I think of all of the moments that
Mm,
I had with my students or with their families or with my colleagues, during my time, and so I think just really holding those close to you on a bad day, a bad week. I see a lot of teachers who make like the binders of like all of the notes that they've gotten over time so that they can go
oh, I
back
love
into it
that,
when they've had
yeah.
a rough day and read a parent note that they got from 2 years before. I think creating a journal like that, or to Sean's point, gratitude journaling is such a great way to do it. Just identifying three things, one thing that was a win for that day, and let that be the win for the day, your silver lining. So yeah, I think really holding those moments, those highs so close to you because they're so special. And if you ask most teachers why you're in the classroom, they're going to say it's because of
Those
those moments,
moments.
because of the
Right.
kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I could think of a better way to wrap this up. So, we want to just thank our listeners for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. And we hope that as you do wrap up this school year, you're able to move into the next year with some of these suggestions.
Thank you so much.
Mhm, thank you.
Thanks.